Sometimes it's kind of weird because we live in two different worlds. I'm a speaker, traveling the world, writing books, right? To them, it's quite foreign. I remember when I left corporate America and I told my mother I was going to be a speaker. She's like, "You're going to talk and people are going to pay you?" I said, "Yes, Mom, that's exactly what's going to happen." I don't know how I got here sometimes because there's so many situations in the inner city before I went to college that if they'd just gone 1 degree off center, it would have been over. When you're going through an engineering degree, I mean, you have to learn, for example, calculus, thermodynamics, physics, all these things. And what it creates is a way of thinking and seeing the world. And it's hard to explain that to people how valuable that is. I can see things easier. And that breadth of knowledge has given me this ability to connect with people because I have that diverse educational background.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course. With insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe DeSena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and host of the Hard Way podcast. I got a good buddy of mine. This is going to be a really good one. This guy is the author to the stars, written a ton of books. Victor Antonio, welcome aboard, buddy.
Joe, thank you for having me on the podcast, man.
This is going to be great. Honestly, you were made for podcasts. You're a machine. Grew up in Chicago the hard way?
The hard way.
How
Food
was
stamps, government cheese, and powdered milk, as I always say.
That's true story or no? Like, tell us about your childhood.
So my family's originally from Puerto Rico, right? So my father and my mother came over late 50s. I think my mother had a 3rd grade education. My father had maybe a 5th grade education. They worked on the farms back in the day. So when they got here, they spoke no English. I'm the youngest of 7. You know, they had what I call black collar jobs at the time. They're beyond blue collar. They're black because they were that dirty. And I mean, we just struggled, man. I mean, it was a big family. We just struggled. We never even owned a car in our whole family. We always drove like the Chicago Transit Authority, the buses. And we were just, a lot of hand-me-downs, a lot of neighbor giving us food once in a while, just trying to make it through.
And the youngest is usually the survivor. So you're in a survival situation and you are the young survivor because they forget about the 7th kid.
They just said, yeah, do whatever you want. After the first one, like, I feel like that, how those geese fly in a V shape? I feel like I'm at the back of the V. And I think my oldest brother took all the headwind, if you know what I mean, and everybody rippled back. It's a funny story, Joe, because my mother was like, I went to high school, went to Wells High School off Augusta, Nashville, for those of you from Chicago. We're about 2-3 miles from the Cabrini Green housing projects to kind of give you an idea of where that area is at. And I remember I was going to go to college, right? My mother says, well, if you don't go to college, you'll have to get a job and, work with your father. And that was the impetus, man, to go to college. I like to tell you I went to college to get an engineering degree because I dreamed of it. No, I didn't want to go work in a factory and we needed to make money.
All the kids, all 7 kids, including you, go to college or no?
No, I'm the only one. Everybody got like what I call 1 or 2 year trade deals. They learned something. I think my 2 brothers dropped out of high school. My 3 sisters got trades. 1 brother died. And then, I was the last one in. And so my mother's like, all right, last hope. Here you go. By the way, you can also see the mistakes of my brothers. I saw the mistakes of my brothers made. I'm like, man, I'm not going down that road. Yeah, I consider myself very fortunate, Joe.
The other 6 were like the practice runs and you got to do it the right way. But honestly, if your sisters or brothers became plumbers or electricians, they're probably doing better than you.
I would like to say that that's the case, but that is not the case. So yeah, I would like to say that's the case, but it's not the case. I don't know how to describe it. We have a great relationship with my brothers and sisters. Sometimes it's kind of weird because we live in two different worlds. You know what I mean? I'm a speaker, traveling the world, writing books, right? To them, it's quite foreign. I remember when I left corporate America and I told my mother I was going to be a speaker. She's like, in Spanish, she was like, you're going to talk and people are going to pay you? I said, yes, Mom, that's exactly what's going to happen. And she just couldn't comprehend. And I remember when I gave her my first book, she looked at it in bewilderment. First of all, she couldn't read English, but she still looked at it in bewilderment and goes, oh, that's nice. And then she put it on top of the refrigerator and that was it.
What's crazy about it that I'm really digging into here is because I'm a first in my family to go to college, university, but there were 6 before you, same genetics, same environment. And somebody got you into college, you got yourself into whatever it may be. And all of a sudden the entire trajectory of your life changed.
Yes.
And you look back as you describe it, your family, I mean, you're light years different. That like so as a country, like that, like look at the little microcosm of your family. As a country, could you imagine if we could level up every family, every citizen that way somehow?
Yeah, I mean, it was. Sometimes I look back, Joe, and this is just being genuine here, in that, I don't know how I got here sometimes, because there's so many times, there's so many situations in the inner city before I went to college that if they'd just gone 1 degree off center, it would have been over. Do you know what I mean? I would have gone the wrong way. And I got story after story. And so when I look back, you realize that, there's all these unintended consequences, little nudges of life, So if you're religious, you believe in the invisible hand of God. If you're an atheist, then you believe in laissez-faire, Adam Smith, invisible hand of the market. Take your pick, whatever invisible hand moved me. I look back and I feel so fortunate. I mean, when we talk about the attitude of gratitude, I personify that because I'm like, wow, because I know just one little thing, 1 degree off, it could have been different. And if you think about that analogy, where they talk about, how they separate two objects by 1 degree, and the further they get in time, the more they separate. That's how I feel sometimes, when I go back to the hood, it's like just two different worlds, man.
The analogy I use all the time is if you and I were sitting in the cockpit of a 747, and by accident your elbow hit one of the tiny dials and it moved over like 1 centimeter, we would end up on the wrong planet.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
we diverge very quick. We diverge initially slowly, but over time, the gap grows bigger. Here's an interesting story. So I got out of the hood, right? And I tell this story because this is very important to me. In our neighborhood, it was pretty much Black and Hispanic, right? And we lived in this bubble, right? And in this bubble, it was almost like everybody who's white had it great, except Blacks and Hispanic. That was the conditioning in the neighborhood, right? The conditioning, right? And I remember when I decided to go to college, and by the way, the teacher that encouraged me to go to college was white. I just want to add these little points in there because there's an end point here to this story. I go to college, and I'm not making this up. It's like the true definition of the anthropological term culture shock. And that is, for the first time, I'm out of the neighborhood. I am now on a campus where it's the majority white, and people from all over the world, like literally all over the world, right? I remember that my first friend, and don't laugh at this, Joe, my first friend in college, his name is Mike. Mike was white. And I remember having a conversation with Mike, and then Mike was telling me how poor he was. And I said, well, Mike, how can you be poor? You're white. To which he looked at me like, are you stupid? You know what I mean? He didn't say it that way, but he kind of looked at me like, what? And it was that scenario right there was like what I call the beginning of the shattering of all my beliefs. Because if you dig into the data, you know that the poorest majority in America, not by percentage, by quantity, are white. The majority of people who use, for example, public assistance, quantity, not percentage, are white. And that was, again, I call it the shattering because it was like, well, what else have I been lied to about? And it was at that moment, I guess, critical thinking started to kick in. I started questioning more things.
It is crazy, right? Because whatever bubble we grow up in, we have 4 children at home. If I didn't drive them nuts around health and wellness, they wouldn't be the way they are. If I would have driven them nuts about something like it's so crazy and dangerous, but it's also so awesome that we get to shape like wet clay these little creatures. Right? And so I lived overseas with the family, 3 different countries. Every time I come back into this country, I'm shocked at the size and shape and maybe lack of education, like all these things. And it didn't have to be that way. Just like you didn't have to get the information you said, you were shattered over, right? So I wish more folks went to university. I wish more folks went into the military. I wish more parents were more involved because we talk about all these big things during presidential elections that we're going to change, but like, let's get back and just focus on the kids.
We don't talk about diverse experiences. You know what I mean? I remember years ago, I read a stat. I don't know if it's valid, but I'm sure it's still close. That 25% of Americans have passports, 25%, which means 75% will never see anything outside the United States. And you've traveled the world. I've traveled the world. I don't know about you, but I'm coming back to the U.S. and I'm always kissing dirt going, what a great country to live in, right? Yeah, we got issues. I get all that, right? But I'm that guy that's going, glad to be here. And so I think the more experiences you have, and I think that's maybe what we're looking for here in this conversation, that the more broader experiences you have, you begin to see more similarities than dissimilarities. And so for me, the second evolution of this was in terms of growing into this new understanding of the world. So I go through college, right? I graduate my engineering degree. I work for a company called Honeywell. I'm sure you heard of Honeywell. I worked for their undersea systems division. And I worked over their electronic test center in Minnesota. Yeah, for sure. Where I met my wife, by the way, who's Minnesotan. And I remember that, in psychology, there's something called the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error. That is when we kind of superimpose a belief system on something that happened or didn't happen, and we totally get it wrong, right? For example, when I was trying to understand, because I almost felt like a fish out of water when I went to Minnesota. Kid from the hood is now in Minnesota. It's real different. If you don't hunt or fish, you're kind of like a fish out of water. So what I started doing was, Joe, to me, the second phase of the enlightenment period for me was when I got there, I kind of noticed that my bosses, and I had several of them, were always reading a book. And so I said to myself, why don't I read what they read? And I remember that was the beginning of like, let me educate myself, not on what the university taught me, but let me start reading what they read. And I began to see a shift. The more I read, the more I understood, the more my knowledge, I guess we had common knowledge. I was able to have better conversations with my bosses. And I realized it had nothing to do with them not wanting to talk to me, is that we didn't have anything in common. Once I started reading what everybody else read, we could have these discussions. And so my fundamental attribution error is they don't like me initially, right? And I could have stuck with that, but I go, nah, I don't think that's it. I said, maybe let me try this. Like I even took up golfing. I learned how to golf just because my friends around me were golfing. And I go, well, maybe they don't, because they never invited me out to the bars afterwards. And I go, well, maybe if I learned how to golf. And sure enough, I learned how to golf. And guess what? They invited me. And all these little things begin to add up that, sometimes we think people are against us, so to speak, or don't like us. Has nothing to do with that. People are looking for commonality. And so I try to find commonality with people. That's one of my biggest gifts, I think.
Yeah, it might not be the color or where you grew up. It might not be any of that. Just you don't have commonality.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
Years ago, I made the decision to transcend race. If you have an issue with race, that's your problem, not mine. Do you know what I mean? I transcend it. It's like, I don't have time for this. We're humans. At the end of the day, we're just a bunch of human beings trying to make it through this thing called life. And too often, I think people get stuck in some type of victimology. Again, I got reasons to be a victim.
I love the language you're using. I love victimology. I also love that you're an engineer. I said to my kids this past weekend, I've yet to meet an unsuccessful engineer.
I've not met one. An engineering degree. It's funny because, people make this statement all the time. College degrees aren't worth anything. And I'm like, I don't know. You're a little too hard on that. I think they exaggerate. I think Elon Musk didn't help. But if you really listen to what Elon Musk said, he was he's spot on. You don't have to go to college if you have extraordinary skills at something. Okay, there's the qualifier. You have to have extraordinary skills at something, right? And I think people look at college as a waste of time. I can't tell you how my engineering degree, year after year, to this day, so we're talking, I graduated in 86. You can run the numbers. It's a long time. Is still paying dividends to this very day. So when I hear people say an engineering degree isn't, really worth what it used to be, I'm like, you're an idiot. That's the best way of putting that.
That's why I go crazy over this idea, and the public hates when I say this, but every kid in America, because not every kid's going to go to college for whatever the reason. We saw with your brothers and sisters. We saw with my sister, right? Not every kid's going to go to college. If they had a 1 year or 2 year leveling up, I would say quasi-military / trade school, so that everybody at least had some skill that they can carry for 30 years with them, like you've carried your engineering degree, right? So anyway, I get a little crazy over that one. Sorry to digress.
No. I think what you're bringing to mind is that what the engineering degree did for me. This is the part that's not quantifiable, and it's intangible. And that is, when you're going through an engineering degree, you have to learn, for example, calculus, thermodynamics, physics, all these things. And what it creates is a way of thinking and seeing the world. And it's hard to explain that to people, how valuable that is. So when I see something, because I've had the diverse experience of my background / education, I can see things easier. I can understand it because I've had all these different courses, everything from economics. I remember taking an anthropology class, right? I can tell you the difference between a robust gracile Australopithecus. Don't tell me why I know that, but there it is. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations with people, and that breadth of knowledge has given me this ability to connect with people because I have that diverse educational background.
You learned how to learn.
That's well said. That's succinct.
Let's talk about your books. You've written a bunch of books. You're reading books, you're cozying up to your bosses. You've now got something in common. Someday you wake up and you say, I'm going to write a book.
My moment came. So rewind the tape. I'm living in Minnesota, working for a company called E.F. Johnson Wireless Company. I was an application engineer there, and the director of sales was giving out these tickets called peak performance tickets, where you go see these speakers, right? And nobody was taking them on, so I was like, I'll take one. I'm an engineer. He said, you can have one. What the hell? It's only for my salespeople, but you can have it. I go downtown Minneapolis. Long story short, I see Zig Ziglar for the first time. I'm like, yikes. One day I want to do something like that. This is like circa 93, right? Fast forward. I'm president of sales and marketing, company out of Miami, and I decided I don't want to do this anymore, Joe. And that was a really hard decision for me because, at that time, I'm banking big money, right? And I'm about to walk away. My family thought I was insane. I said, do you remember your roots? I said, yeah, I remember our roots. So you want to go back to them? I said, no, but I can't do this anymore. And so on May 9th, 2001, 3:48 p.m. to be exact, I walked away. And I remember saying, I want to be a speaker. I want to be that. I had it in my head, and let me write my first book. And the first book was actually a fictional book based on Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, right? And I called it The Corporate Inferno, based on Alighieri's book. And obviously I changed it to make it very corporate-y because what I saw in corporate America was, I guess, stratification layers, structures, and sometimes people weren't doing the right things. And that's not a judgment on all companies, just my perception of some companies. And that was the beginning of writing books. And when I wrote that book, I was so proud of it. Had a bunch of typos, right? Had to get it edited because, my English isn't the best sometimes. But nonetheless, I finished it, I completed it. That gives you a sense of momentum. And that's what it did for me. It clarified my thoughts. I put them down on paper. It's all fictional, obviously. And then the second book was called The Logic of Success, and that was more autobiographical. And again, I think I write to clarify my thoughts. And to when you, in your head, everything sounds good. So you put it down on paper, you start seeing the holes in your thinking and your logic. And being able to write things down, write a book really clarifies a lot of stuff in your head, which in turn makes me a better speaker.
I like that a lot. I got a lot of friends that journal, and I say to myself, what the hell do I need to journal for? I write so many emails all day long, but the way you just said that, you've got it in your head. We can't always believe everything we think. You write it down and you get a chance to even look at it the next day. And right, you need 24 hours and look at it and say, what the hell am I thinking here?
When I was writing the Sales Ex Machina book, the AI in sales book, right? When I was writing that book, I thought I had more content. In other words, I started writing it down and I'm like, I only have 75 pages worth. That's all I had. When you empty yourself, because that's the whole thing, right? Fill yourself and then empty it all out. And I realized I had 75 pages. And I said, well, I need more pages than that. And then I started going down the rabbit hole and, actually doing some more research and then begin to build the book, make it more full. But unless I had put it down on paper, I wouldn't have known that I only had 75. And that allowed me to dig for more content to make the picture complete.
You thought you had more. Give us a synopsis of that. But everybody, we're selling. I say this to people: we're selling all day, every day. We're selling to our spouse. We're selling to our kids. We're always selling, so we better be good at it. Talk to me about the book.
Sales Ex Machina it's two parts. Again, this was released in 2018, way before generative AI. ChatGPT, Claude, and all these other programs coming out now. So in 2018, when nobody heard about this, Sales Ex Machina, my vision of the future, and I believe I'm correct, I was correct when I wrote it, is that the Ex Machina comes from Old Latin, meaning from the machine. Sales from the machine. And at that time, I was envisioning that the CRM, the Customer Relationship Management System, as we know it, will go away. And what will happen is you will have a collapse to this one mega platform where marketing will, have their access. All your content will be on that, content management systems, your sales enablement, sales engagements, CRMs as we know them, your ERP systems. All these things are going to collapse onto one large platform. The better term today would be like a revenue intelligence platform. And that's what you're starting to see happen today. So that was the origin of the book. Everything collapses. I got all the data in one place. Now I can really analyze it using AI. And by the way, AI is simply about prediction. Really, if you think about it, if I were to nail it down to one word, it's prediction. And the best way to understand AI, and it was the gentleman from Wired Magazine, I think his name is Kevin Kelly. He said, think of AI, and he used this word, I thought it was brilliant, cognification of everything. I was like, what? The cognification of everything. Here's how he defined it. He said, think of electricity. He said, AI is a utility. To which I said, what? Again, just a frame shift, right?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, think of electricity. It's in the lights, it's in the cameras, it's in TV, it's everywhere. He says, AI will be a utility. It will be everywhere in everything. And he said this about, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago before, I did. And I just think that's a brilliant way of looking at it because that's what it's all about, that everything's going to be AI enabled. And so AI as a discipline, I think is not really a discipline. It's more of a utility. They're going to be people who generate electricity, also known as AI.
A little faster, a little less friction, a little more organized, kind of everything we do.
Yeah, stronger, better, faster, Daft Punk.
It kind of senses we're going to hang a right turn up ahead in our car. We should probably. One thing I need some help with is when I travel. I think we all need help. I have a big network. I've stayed in touch with a lot of people over the years. Mm-hmm. When I land anywhere or I'm traveling, I just wish my phone would say, hey, make sure you get in touch with these 12 people you haven't stayed in touch with in a while because you're in New York.
I'm sure there's an app out there. Right? Wasn't there something called Something Square?
I don't know.
That was out there that will tell you. I think what's fascinating about AI is where it's going. And that is, I see it more as an enablement tool where a lot of people are predicting doom and gloom. I think it's a prediction tool that's going to help us with a lot of things.
I'm excited because our business, Spartan, right? We put on events, physical events. The hard part for us, we're such Flintstones in swinging hammers and building courses on the side of a mountain that the Jetson side of the business could possibly or hopefully be more efficient because of AI. We're going to market better. We're going to sell better. We're going to our finance department's going to be better. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think I remind people that data is the new oil. And I don't know if people really get that. Yeah. That, when I talk to companies about AI, I remind them, we used to see CRMs, and maybe we still see CRMs as, from a sales perspective, as cumbersome. I got to load the data in, right? Salespeople always whine about that. It's interesting how only 3 to 4% of data sales conversations actually make it into a CRM. That was a fascinating data point. But imagine if we just start loading up our CRM and we view it not as a task to be done, but every time we load it with data, it creates a bigger asset. Because I believe that just like you have capital assets for any business, building, real estate asset, the database itself will be an asset.
At your core, I know you're an author, I know you're a speaker, but at your core, are you a sales team supercharger? What are you?
A sales team supercharger. What do I consider myself?
Yeah, in other words, I'm a company. I've got a huge sales team. Would I bring you in?
Yeah, that's what they do. I'm a mechanic. I'm a sales mechanic, if I can put it. I'm always about, I started Sales Influence years ago, a little background. So I decided to go into sales. I did the basic sales training. I said, I want to talk about this. Everybody knows how to sell, right? ABC and all that good stuff. And I realized that in 2008, the market was changing already. Customers were smarter. Consumers were smarter. You can't pressure people into buying, right? At least that's not the long-term game. And so I remember reading Dr. Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, which is, the 6 levers of influence. And that got me started down the behavioral economics, buying behavior, rabbit hole. And I started studying everything that had to do with neuroscience, even before neuroscience was popular like it is today. So my subtitle for Sales Influence is Finding the Why and How People Buy. And so what I do is I approach it from that perspective, because in today's market, I always say there's going to be 2 epochs or eras of selling. There's pre-internet, post-internet. Pre-internet, you, the salesperson, had the information. So therefore, you had some leverage in the conversation. People wanted to hang around because guess what? They wanted to learn more so they can make a buying decision. Fast forward, we have the internet. Now you're 70, 80, 90, 95% into the buying cycle. You don't want more information. You know what you want. And so if you try to pressure somebody who's probably more informed than you are, that's not going to be a good thing. In today's market, what I'm seeing is that if we can understand the buying journey, right, what they know, how much they know, that we can shape and guide that behavior. And so when I train salespeople, it's not about pressuring people to buy. It's to really understand, how do they make buying decisions? What's the friction? This is where my engineering part comes in. I go, what's the coefficient of friction that holds them back from moving forward in a buying decision? And so, for example, I train on never let people raise an objection, because if they raise it, you'll never change their mind. It's hard to do that. It's like studies have shown this. If you raise the objection, Joe, the probability of me changing your mind go down dramatically. So I teach block objection, which means you raise them. offer to resolve them, and you tie them down, right? Gives you more control in the conversation. We talk about de-risking a deal. Let me show you how you can minimize the risk in the buyer's mind so they can make a decision to move forward. So those are the things I focus on because I think we all know the big pieces. Let's call them the bricks of selling. The bricks of the sales process we all know. I like to think of my content as the mortar, right? The subtle things between the bricks that we have to do to really keep the sale from getting stuck. That's what I train companies on.
You're a sales engineer.
Yes.
I like that. I've never heard that term before. I like it.
No, that was the actual title we had. I mean, there is a big group. I mean, people are surprised that I have an engineering degree when I tell them because they're like, you're quite articulate for an engineer. And if you ever see my stage platform keynotes, they're pretty dang good. And they're very engaging, very animated. But again, I took Zig Ziglar, married it with a nerd.
Yeah, not what you would expect for a guy that has 5 pencils and a protractor in his pocket.
Little pocket protector, the whole thing, right? Dude, I remember those days.
What's the latest book and how do we find you? Let's hear about the latest book.
Coming next month, I haven't have a release date yet for it, but it's relationship selling. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of Jim Cathcart. Only old school folks know his name probably, but Jim Cathcart is the person who wrote the book, the first book, Relationship Selling, owns the IP to Relationship Selling. And so I think it was written in 84, 85. Anyway, he approached me. I did an event where I did a keynote. He was there. He says, hey, would you like to rewrite this one with me? I'm like, what? Yeah, sure, man. Because I was fanboying this guy. Yeah. Because it's like this guy's like a legend in my eyes. So yeah, he let me rewrite it, kind of add my sales technical stuff and influence stuff to it, and we got the new version coming out next month. We're just waiting for the publisher to kind of give us the go. So relationship selling, be on the lookout for it.
And how do people find you?
VictorAntonio.com. Everybody should know me. Victor Antonio. Just go to Victor. I'm all over the internet, man. By the way, a lot of great content. If I could, joking aside, there's a lot of great content online. I think I have over like 1,700 videos on YouTube.
Wow.
Podcasts. And Joe, I don't know if you knew this. Joe, that I have a TV reality show on the Paramount Network.
I did not know that. Yeah.
It's called Life or Debt. Yeah, check it out. Life or Debt. It's pretty cool.
Life or Debt. I like that. How long?
It's a great show, man.
How long you been doing the show?
We did it for a year. We did one full season. I was right after Bar Rescue. John Taffer.
Yeah.
So John Taffer was my mentor over at Spike TV that got bought by Paramount. And what I love about that show was to bring it all the way back to the beginning. That show is about people helping people who are struggling financially. So I'm the host. And you should watch it. And, if you're a listener, you should watch this show. By the way, it's educational. Obviously, a little bit of entertainment in there. But what's fascinating is that you never know what the outcome is. You give somebody a 90-day roadmap. You think you come back, everything's going to be hunky-dory. By the 4th episode, Joe, they had to have a bodyguard on set with me because every husband wanted to kick the living shit out of me, if you know what I mean, because they were pissed.
Well, thanks for coming on. This was fun.
Thank you for having me. Spartans. Okay, sorry.